In this video, we're going to be looking at quick ways that you can start to indicate your feet. The way I like to think about feet is really just versions of a triangle. We'll start with some standard views and then I'll give you some more information to fill them in. At total, I try to keep no more than 4 to 5 lines for these. So this would be the back, this is the side, here's the front, and then one relational line from the front of the shin down into the top of the toe. So this is not a line I like to break up often. There's only really one place that the foot has a plane break, and that would be in the transition from the bones in their grouping. Otherwise, just keep it smooth there. This reads for me as 3/4 because I get the front moving to face a direction. If we continue to turn this, and let's say now I'm going to make this profile view, I'll lose that straight for the front and then just extend the length of the foot. So that could be out here. Back 3/4. Right, let's say I'm going to use the back, which would be the heel, and then that can go in its direction. So that's 3 lines. And then do the same thing. Do a C curve from the front down. Then I like to bring in my 3/4 back, the width of that heel up. So that gives us like a really nice perspective triangle that I can track a ground plane on. What do you have from this? Well, I could have gesture versions of this. So perhaps someone's taking a step. So maybe I see something, and instead of it looking exactly like that, it's still 3/4, but instead I would see some series of pinches and stretches. So maybe this line is up here. Instead of this line, maybe I get an S curve, and that's the bottom of the foot stretching or getting taller. And then the front starts to pinch more, right? So in each of these, I can take that glove or that sock shape and then start to adjust it to have a different quality of gesture. So maybe this comes down and hits the toes, and then the toes pinch against the floor. I haven't really changed my 3/4 at all, right? It still has the basic idea of side, front, right? So I'm starting to suggest that there's a bit of dimension here, but the big difference would be that I've taken and now I've separated out, say, the last little bit of toe shape here. So the big toe is the only one that faces up, so that's kind of directed up towards the sky. The remaining toes all do the same thing. They grip the floor, right? So they all go down in the same direction, except for the small toe, which doesn't do anything. Nobody knows what it does. I just made that up, but it does something. This just doesn't fit my design as well, so I'm angry at it. And then the idea of it having a gesture is that you could take the same shape and then kind of pinch it and stretch it. So for this, I would say, well, let's also include the lower leg. So you see how I get from that S curve of the calf and Achilles tendon down to the back of my foot. That's the back of the calcaneus. Here's the front, that flow line down to the top of the toe there. And then this goes back in space. The most important things that I'm looking for in this is just, can I relate this to a plane that creates sympathy with the ground? In order to help force that perspective, I'll bring the heel up. You can see it does kind of track with the Achilles tendon a bit. You kind of push that plane change up into the calf here to get a back and a side. You don't have to do a lot more, but what I do enjoy bringing into the foot would always be like, I like to include that ankle, or especially if I see the relationship of both, there's a nice asymmetry to be found between them. I always think of the ankle, which would be your tibia and fibula, as grabbing onto the top of the tarsus group. So it's a wrench that kind of grabs onto that group back here. So this boxier form here is the heel block or your calcaneus bone. This would be a weird description, but it's a nice perspective description, but the bone would have more of an angle to it. But even if I start to use some wrapping lines on the foot, I might start to suggest that that's going down this way. And it's hard to see because then we'd have that design of the bone pushed into the cartilage or the padding at the bottom. So it's difficult for sure, but it always makes the foot feel more elegant or natural to me. And then over here, I'm going to try to just push out that big toe. Notice that that's pointing at the sky, and how the other ones you can group as a shape that's going down. So that'd be my gesture. Okay, let's do this one. So let's look at that front view first. Remember we did the front where I'm looking for the width, couple gestures or 2 or 3 lines. That sets up my width. And then here I just let them kind of incrementally broaden so I get the wider aspect of the foot. I know it could be a little bit different for everybody, but I look for that same peak to the curve, which can be the toe next to the big toe, right? So I'm kind of trying to hit that arc and then swing it back. I know sometimes the big toe is longer on some people. So then after this, I'm looking for my ankles. Here's the lower leg. The one thing I always like to find is that offset angle of the fibula to the tibia. So the relationship I'd be looking for is from the tarsus to the toes, you can kind of rough in about a halfway. That's where the metatarsus might be starting. So we'd get our out, and then that would start to change and drop down. The metatarsus area looks to me like a slide. So the bones kind of come out and down, and then they start to run into the ground plane or kind of even out there. So it'd be kind of a shape like this if I were to draw it in perspective. So just imagine like a kid here, sliding down. And then you'd have the toes. So that ends, let's say, this would end around here. So in gesture, I would just want to mark these out, important areas. And then maybe you could even suggest the quality to the bone. So similar designs, if the bones look similar hand to foot, but the bones in the foot are wider. So maybe I'll make the big toe a little boxier, and then I always group these. So let's group these across, especially the next three, because God knows what the pinky toe's doing. Nothing productive. So that comes out to grip the ground. So you could do a shape and then just split it up. But I'll just do like a little ball here for the pinky. So that would be a good gesture for me. And maybe I just organize the basic view and put some information on the different breakup of the groups in there. In this course, what you're going to learn is how to pose your figures, what design is, how to think about the internal dynamics of your figures. I'll see you there. So this will be my profile, in which I'm looking to avoid that straight line across the front. Think about, here's the tibia. Could even start to show maybe this is a little bit of the padding that's being squashed by the weight around the heel. Here's my effort to keep this really clean. The only plane break I would see is here. So that would be tarsus to metatarsus. What I think you should absolutely avoid like the plague is little bumps and veins. And I think there's been a lot of foot drawings that have gone awry for people that put too much little prickly hairs on too early and all kinds of weird stuff. So force yourself to keep this really nice and clean until you're ready to develop it. And then maybe whenever I'm comfortable, right? So what I'm noticing here is the arch. You can see it's a little bit better on the inside of the foot. Some of that padding's not as strong. Right now would be another good shape that we'll do next is just a recommendation for the underside of the foot. I could draw my quick little box here, just try to place the big toe. Make sure we organize the nail to focus or point up. Use that to help frame the direction of the space or the perspective. And then maybe just a slight overlap over here. But I'm not looking to do a whole lot more than this for a gesture. Again, if we're looking at something under, a view from beneath would be a footprint. So footprints are always asymmetrical, right? Because we have the long padding across the outside, and then on the instep, we have the arch, and then the heel. So that looks like gesture to me because it has this curve against this curve against this curve. And then that would flow into the big toe here. And then the padding for these toes would move this way. And then so what I'll do with this is make the gesture go up. Let's say this toe is coming at me. So I could use that same idea, that basic shape going up. But I usually, for perspective, would just kind of pop this to have a little box. Because we all know that padding has a thickness. So if we just turn this into a little plane that curves, then you have a static or kind of standard view. Because I could also see this kind of pinching too. Maybe bend it or something. But that at least gives us the way that we could start to approach the underside with our front 3/4 profile. This is like a gestured view of the foot pushing on the ball of the foot, the front part of the cartilage. So here's my shape. If you've watched the hand video, notice that looks quite a bit like the hand shape we started with. Here's the offset asymmetry of the end of the bones. So that helps me kind of organize out where I think my tibia and fibula are going to be. That's the tarsus group or the talus. I'm going to do like a halfway in here. Maybe that's the end of the tarsus, and then I get metatarsus from there. And see that ending around here for the big toe. Let's create an arc and end that section. And then big toe pushed in, and then it's pinched. So I have some overlap here and that nail. So just something rough, to get the idea of the gesture of that toe, the positioning. And then maybe like in some of the other gestures, we use a lot of hard angles. When weight was really emphasized in an area, we would push those sharps, make a point to kind of load those lines up so that they felt heavier and different than other parts. And then for the remaining three, maybe they just go this way. Let's group those. And then they all kind of move back this way. but stay within that group. And then just kind of the last little part for that shape there. So that'd be the kind of the length of the toe bent down, or the length of the foot bent down, and then the pressure being pushed on that big toe. Let's do it from the back. So that's good. We just talked about that back view. So there's a gesture out. Here's the underside of the foot, tibia and fibula, giving us that offset quality of the bones of the lower leg. Now the heel has been brought up, so we could see that, especially in the pinching. And now I'm looking at the bottom of the foot for that same design, but foreshortened. So I could do that here. I do like that side. Let's do an overlap. That would be coming forward. Here's that area of the raised arch. And then this is where the foot would start to make contact with the ground for the toes, which I don't see. So that would be a shape. That looks like I start to see something here. Maybe we could push a little overlap to show the big toe there or something. So that's how I'd be trying to think through that footprint shape, right? This going in, but then we talked about its pinching. Maybe I could even see this as having 3 planes. But what are my planes doing here? Well, I'm trying to show the arch from under, that this goes up. Right, so this is low. That's an area that would contact. This goes up and then back down. Sometimes you could even try to show more dimension to the footprint. Maybe here I would show this padding is fuller and all this goes up. It just really depends what you want of the gesture, however much you think you need to communicate, so you could come back later and develop it a bit more. So maybe a few lines there just help me remember, oh yeah, like I drew this in life class, or I saw this cool reference, and I'm just pointing out some things because I want to use those later when I'm thinking of my character that I'm drawing in my sketchbook. So that would be there. That's done. Let's do this one with some gesture and movement here. So their diagonal is nice. And that kind of runs down and makes contact. On the back, I'm going to do the width. Let that flow into the back of the heel. And then how does that contact with the ground? And then this is coming forward. So it's kind of like that example that I showed you for the gesture of the 3/4 foot, but this is pushing forward and then out that way. So in this, all I'm trying to show is the difference in that sock shape. Keep it simple, just this, and then that would be in front. Right? So this coming forward. We just separate out some of the groups for those different toes. Here's that shape for the smaller toe starting to lift. And then we have the smaller toe up here. Let's add a few of those areas of context for the bones. So fibula, push that over for that wrench design. Think of a ball in there if it helps. And here's the padding. Maybe I'll give this a little bit more of a stretch. And then down. And then a lot of the front of this is pinched. Maybe I would use or try to push more C or some straights in here to help land that and exaggerate the quality of contact. And so I think that'd be good. That would be done for there. I don't know if we've done a front 3/4. We'll do this one really quick. Forward. So there's 3/4. That's where it's split. Bones. Halfway. Tarsus to metatarsus. Heel block back here. How am I using the ground plane, or can I be a little bit more specific with my ground plane after I've had that envelope included, sock included? Where does that tarsus group make contact, and then into your, or metatarsus group, and then brief explanation of some of the toes. So boxy big toe, pull across, and then here's my groups. So in this, I've summarized a lot of information from a study of the bones and the anatomy of the foot. So gesture is always that, right? If it helps and this gets you going, that's fantastic. If any part feels confusing or like it doesn't really read for you well as a design, you have every opportunity to kind of redesign this in every way you see fit. You could learn about the anatomy of the foot and then make some different choices or try to accentuate those bridges differently. Gottfried Bommes has this crazy lay-in for the feet that does such a cool job of getting the arches. It never makes sense to me how I would do it. It's so cool, but so complex. So I have those kinds of thoughts all the time. Yeah, and I think this is it. So, last thing I would say for this one is, one thing to think about too is when the foot makes contact, think about the gesture of the padding. If I put a lot of weight on that padding, I could also try to pinch and stretch some areas, whether it's the underside of the foot or the padding around the calcaneus or the heel block there. It doesn't always have to be the case, but it can sometimes make like a nice impression to get that sense of weight or push on an area. I always begin drawing the feet this way. I end the feet with these simple 4 to 5 lines to make sure that the figure is grounded, and that the feet explain the perspective of that ground plane. I think the problem with people drawing feet is the obsession of bumps and veins and bones and muscles. And so to force yourself into a 4 to 5 line description takes that all off the table right away and allows you to just focus on the most important thing, which is building continuity with your figure and putting it on the ground. And then once you have that set up, then the foot can become whatever you want it to be.
The gesture course is now fully completed.
Yay!
If you've ever struggled with gesture and you want to learn Michael Hampton's various methods to approaching gesture, this course is for you. You'll go from the basics to difficult poses to beyond gesture. And to save some money, we're having our summer sale right now. You get 20% off this course and all our other courses with the code SUMMERSALE. See you there.